You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, thanks all for joining us for this month's Armchair Botanist Forum. We're excited to share all about the International Botanical Congress that not just Tiana and I went to and participated in, but a few others from our department went as well. So our aim today is really just to tell y'all what the Congress is, and a little bit about what happens every year. This has been, I think IBC has been a thing since 1900 officially. So it's been a long time that botanists have been coming together and collaborating and sharing. So, yes, we'll talk about what it is, and then we'll share kind of how we participated at the Congress, and then some cool stuff that we learned too. So, okay, here's our outline. So, Tiana's going to kick it off to tell us the what about IBC, and I'll let you take it away. I was just letting Alan in.
No, perfect. I let him in too, Ash, so I'm happy to do that
Perfect.
one. Um,
Perfect.
okay, perfect. So thanks, Ashley. So I'm starting out my part of the presentation with a couple of slides that I have from a separate nomenclature talk that I give. Because I think it helps set the stage for what the IBC, the International Botanical Congress, is and what its role is in the names of plants, that being the goal, right? Because the goal, and I've got a quote here from a publication that is really a classification system for the natural world to standardize the naming of species and order them according to their characteristics and their relationships with one another. There are three terms y'all have probably heard us talk about in these sessions and just kind of bandied them about that I think are kind of useful to at least go through and have a brief understanding or definition for. And the first one is nomenclature. And what do I mean? What do we mean when we're talking about that? We're talking about a system of naming taxonomic groups of whatever, but of plants in this case, according to a standardized system, right? That standardized system being important. Systematics, that's another thing that you'll hear us talk about. And that's kind of the study of the evolutionary relationships between these organisms, between these taxonomic groups, using various methods, right? Morphological, genetic, biochemical, and other new pathways, as Ashley will kind of talk to you about. Looking at how these things are related to each other through different and novel ways, but going back to the primary source of data, which are the herbarium specimens. And then lastly, taxonomy. So this is the science of classifying, describing, characterizing these organisms, of grouping them based on those evolutionary relationships. So kind of a branch of systematics. So you can see it's a bit nuanced right there. But the next slide, we'll talk about, thank you, Ashley. So binomial nomenclature, right? So let's take it back to the two-part naming system. So we credit, so binomial nomenclature, naming a plant using just two parts of its botanical name, the genus and the species. That image down there is Carl Linnaeus, who is credited with systematically applying binomial nomenclature to known plants, starting in 1753 with his not starting, but in 1753 with his species Plantarum. That is sort of kind of the definitive work that we'll hear about again a little bit later. But this is a method, two names for a species. And this succeeded the prior method, which is a polynomial system of naming plants. So the genus plus many, many specific names. So what you're looking at here is for the honeybee or Apis mellifera, today known as Apis mellifera. And above it, that's the binomial. And above it, you can see the polynomial for that same species prior to standardizing to a binomial nomenclature. And I won't read that all for you, but you can see it begins with Apis pubescens thoras subgrisio, and it continues to kind of give you a difference. And what does it do? It gives you an idea of what that species is and looks like and how it's different from others. So the application of these binomial names or the rules governing them are determined by the International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi, and Plants. And so on the next slide, I'm kind of going into what that code really is. So we keep calling it the code. It is the International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi, and Plants. ICN or ICNAFP are kind of the abbreviations, but this is what governs the rules and the recommendations for dealing with these scientific names. It governs plants. It governs other organisms that are traditionally treated as algae, fungi, or plants. So things like cyanobacteria and slime molds, which are none of those above. Um, and you should know that this code, so this publication, this agreement, this set of decisions, they take effect as soon as they're ratified by the Congress. And that'll all kind of mean a little bit more as I walk you through the next few slides, but which we're not going to just yet. But so a Congress happens, which is the event at which botanists get together, which is what Ashley and I will be talking about. But then the subsequent year, that code, the things that were ratified are published. And what that blue rectangle in the top right hand of your screen is an example of the most recent code that has been published, not ratified, but published, was 2018, and the link for accessing that. But just for all of y'all to know that the ICN does not include cultivated plants. So it does not govern the naming of these cultivated plants. There's a separate organization, the International Society for Horticultural Science, that publishes the International Code of Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants. And the link for that is down there as well. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Ash. So just to give you a little bit, so Ashley alluded to this at the beginning, but a little bit of the history of the code. So the very first Congress it was the Paris Congress in 1900. And there were events that happened before that, but that's the first one. That's where the first code starts getting credited. So 1900, the Paris Congress. 1906, the Vienna Rules were published, and that was kind of important, right? So the idea with the 1906 decisions, the Vienna Rules decisions, was that they had to choose a point at which this is where botanical nomenclature starts. These are the names we'll go back to. Because our system of naming plants is a system of priority, whichever was published first, you have to choose what is the first publication that your reference point for those publications. And that's where we come back to Carl Linnaeus, 1753, Species Plantarum, and you are looking at a woodcut of him in black and white taken from Wikipedia. And next to that, you're seeing a page from the Linnean Society of London website of Species Plantarum, the publication itself. So in 1912, the Brussels rules are published. And what I've done here in this timeline, I'm just kind of giving you, not exhaustively, but a few important points. But in 1912, this is when the botanists that were gathering together said, hey, wait a minute, let's give a little more attention to these non-vascular plants, because for the most part, for the last 12 years, we've just been dealing with vascular plants, plants that have vascular tissues. So we're ignoring a lot of mosses and a lot of other organisms and other groups when we're dealing with this. So we need to keep them in mind. 1935, the Cambridge Rules. So this is where these are some amendments to the code that y'all may have heard about or may know about the type method. So this is when describing a new species to science, you designate a type specimen, a physical specimen that will forever be tied to that scientific name, even if it turns out that scientific name becomes a synonym of a more currently accepted species, but that will always hold status as a type specimen, and it's required. Effective publication, valid. And then the idea of legitimate and illegitimate names that are used illegitimately because they didn't follow the code, then may start to get used in common parlance and used about, but a little bit more study into it may show that they are illegitimate. And then the code is what kind of governs, well, what name do we go by if this name was published illegitimately? There is information about the timeline of the code. There's a really great, even on Wikipedia, there's a really great summary of kind of the years and what some of the major decisions were. So I would point y'all towards that in Wikipedia. But there's also a brief history of the code, and that link is listed at the bottom of this webpage, so y'all can go to that. The next slide is, so 1947, the unofficial Britannia rules. Okay, now we get into the codes. Let me let Linda Jo in real quick. Now we get into the codes here. So the Stockholm Code. So this was important. So this is 1952 that it was published. So the Congress itself, so the gathering of botanists would have happened between 1 and 3 years before that. And this is where the International Association of Plant Taxonomists was established. This is the organization that kind of governs and puts on and votes during these IBCs, during these congresses. This is the organization that publishes the journal Taxon, which is the journal where proposals to amend the code are submitted and published. So pretty important organization, global organization, to help manage kind of the administrative side of all of this. So, and then we go through just for you to see that they're held on different continents. We've got the Paris, Montreal, Edinburgh, Seattle, Leningrad, Sydney, and then the Berlin Code in 1988, which is that particular code is where they decided that the code would always have to be published in the year immediately succeeding the year in which the Congress was held. So, so we'll see after that point, we should now have every year where you see a code published, the Congress was held the year prior, more or less. Okay, we can skip to the next slide. Thank you, Ash. So Tokyo, St. Louis here in the US, the Vienna Code, the Melbourne Code. So 2012 was important because that is when this code changed name, and it started, it used to be the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. I believe that was its only name. And then the algae and fungi were added on to that name there. 2018, the Shenzhen Code. So that was held in China. And then in 2023, there were supposed to be, that would have been the rights every six. So I'm sorry, I didn't say this, but every 6 years the Congress is held. So 23, that's when the next Congress should have been held in Brazil. But unfortunately, COVID disrupted so many things. And this is an extremely large Congress and conference. And as you'll see when Ashley presents in some of my latter slides, but then, of course, we expect that the Madrid Code will be published in 2025 next year because we held the International Botanical Congress, the 20th one in Madrid, or we attended in Madrid just this summer. And then just for those of you that want to put this on your calendar, the next Congress, International Botanical Congress, is going to be in 2029, and the hosts will be Cape Town, South Africa. And thank you, Ash. So a little bit, and if y'all have questions, the chat is actually up here for me, so you can throw them in the chat and I'll bring them up as I'm talking. But so the International Botanical Congress, what does it really consist of? It consists of two sections really. The 15th through the 19th of July this year was the nomenclatural section. The second part is, which was the 21st through the 27th, is the Congress and presentations and the actual ratification of the proposals from the nomenclature section, or the decisions from the nomenclature section. So two parts, but all the things I've been talking about so far about the code happen for the most part, between the 15th through the 19th of July of this year. So the way that this works, this is a nomenclatural section, and the way that it works is proposals are submitted to amend the most recent code, the Shenzhen Code, that has been published. And in this nomenclatural section, there were 433 different proposals that were submitted that had to be reviewed by the nomenclatural committee, the section. And those submissions, I think I've got this correct, but were as early as the June 2020 all the way through March 2023 for submission. And, it requires, more than 75% no votes in order to reject a proposal. I myself did not participate in this section, neither did Ashley, but we did have research botanists from the organization attending. Morgan Gostel filled us in quite a bit on what was happening, and we seeded our votes. The herbarium gets 3 votes as listed in the Global Registry of Herbaria, which is Index Herbariorum. And so we ceded our votes to Morgan Gostel, who voted on our behalf for a lot of those proposals. So who's voting? Members, people that are members of the International Association of Plant Taxonomists, individuals that proposed amendments, and members that are part of the permanent nomenclatural committees as well. Okay, and then you're looking at a couple of images of, this is just kind of what it looks like. These are pictures that are taken from the IBC Madrid webpage from the Shenzhen nomenclatural section. So a lot of these proposals are addressed at this nomenclatural section. At the very end of that second week, on the 27th, that at the Congress, all attendees to the Congress, so all 3,000, well, you'll hear that in a minute, but all 3,000 or so botanists that attended the conference would agree to accept the nominations, to accept what was proposed during the nomenclatural section, although the votes had already happened. Okay, so just to give you an example of what was happening in that second week in the Congress, which is the part that Ashley and I attended, which is really what you'll hear about for the rest of this session. There were over 3,000 attendees from 95 different countries. They were organized, the presentations, all the content was mostly organized into plenary lectures, workshops, keynote lectures, and symposia. And the symposia were basically a way of grouping talks, and these were proposed as early as I think 2022. So there were 267 different kind of organizational or different topical sections under which over 1,502 different talks were organized. So there were 3,052 abstracts submitted, and of those you can see some were talks and some were posters. And I don't know if this includes, well, not quite. It doesn't quite out. There's some workshops in here that are missed as well. On the right-hand side, just to show you what that looks like, the program is available, that link's at the bottom, but here I just randomly went through the program and pulled one of these symposia out, and you can see that the symposium title was Towards a More Ethical Science, Decolonizing Botanical Research, session 1. So, and you can see the organizers of those sessions. So these are individuals that would have had to submit this symposium as an idea to the conference as much as over a year ago. And I just for you to know, I looked up Wednesday morning, and yeah, I see Denise. That's a really great comment. But just the Wednesday morning alone, which was the only day that was a half session. I think it finished at 2. There were 18 concurrent symposia. That means there were 18 separate rooms running 5 to 6 talks in each of those rooms, one after the other. So yes, trying to decide what to attend was a bit of a nightmare. And so they have an app. They had a conference app. They also had at one point, they had a PDF of the program that you could look through, and they did have a few other ways to try to help you organize, but really it was a matter of looking at what was being presented, hoping you had taking the time to look at all the different symposia and the individual talks in those symposia, looking at physically where they were. The location where this was held, it was a convention center in Madrid, was pretty, it was huge, but the rooms were actually quite close to one another. So it wasn't too difficult to move across one symposium to another, except that you'll notice that right below that title I just read to you for the symposium title are a few of the talks in that session, just the 1, 2, 3, 4, the first 5 talks in that session. And there's not times on those talks. And although the talks each have a 15 to 20 minute limit, I think it's 15 minutes presentation, 5 questions, can't remember. There's not a set time for each one of those to start. So it meant it was really difficult to hop between symposia, but in the middle of a symposium. But anyway, some really interesting talks, like just this one session, you can see gender equality and the visualization of women in ethnobiological research. Biocultural heritage of Lituanian in Guam, and a few others, using photo ID and digital methods to empower local communities. I can't tell you, actually, I'll let Ashley talk because there's some things she'll tell you about some of the things we heard. All right, perfect, Ashley, and I think that might, yes, hit into your section too. But if anyone has a question, you're welcome to ask it out loud or let me know. Oh, good question. Sorry, Denise, you just asked if these are all scholarly papers or presentations. So all of these are presentations. Many of them are the verbal presentation of published findings. Many of them are preliminary studies that will lead to published findings. So it sort of varies. So it varies. All right, Ashley, you ready for me to hand it over?
Yes, thanks T for that introduction. Yes, and also just with the concurrent sessions. I don't know if y'all remember, but a few weeks ago, remember when there was a big deal with all the airlines, like uh was it something wrong with their systems? A lot of people were affected by flights being canceled. So like Tiana said, it was hard to jump from one symposia to another, but also made it difficult that some folks who were supposed to present either ended up being sick and not actually attending, or something wrong with their flights and didn't attend. So that also made it a little bit difficult. But yeah, with 18 concurrent sessions, I mean, there was a lot of planning prior involved. Um, but I'm gonna at least share with y'all at least who attended from the garden and kind of what we did. So first, we've got our VP of Research and Conservation, Peter Fritsch, and his student, Maverick. They both presented on blueberries, and I think even in separate symposia as well. So I was able to attend Maverick's talk, which was great. And then Alejandro Vasco gave two different talks, both covering ferns. And I think those were also two different symposia as well. Yep, on two different days. And Ale also, and Peter, both were co-authors on a few posters as well. And then here's us. Tiana and I both presented posters, which was fun. Tiana did a digital format, which maybe Tiana can talk about a little bit. And then there was also a physical poster session. So I had a physical poster in a poster hall. And then there was also, I'm trying to think of the poster island is what they called it. There were a lot of screens in this small area where folks who had digital posters could go up and stand by a screen and present their poster that way, or just at little computers with monitors the other way, this way, vertical, to also go through and look at all the digital posters, which was pretty cool. And then Morgan Gostel also gave a talk on Vernonia. And then he also co-authored a few posters that his students gave as well. So there's a few posters there and a few more posters. And we wanted a place to permanently put some of the posters that we all presented. So there is a link to our webpage that has just some of our posters if you're interested in looking at those a little bit more. And also at the bottom of that link, you'll see a gallery of just some regular fun conference photos. It was also great. So Tiana mentioned there were like workshops and other meetings. This specifically was a group together working on the Tropical Africa National Science Foundation grant. So if you've been with us long enough, you know that digitization grants are uber important for us to get everything online. We we don't actually have funding for this grant, but we have a significant amount of African material that we are starting to digitize and transcribe our African specimens as well to contribute to this portal eventually. So it was great to meet with other folks who are on this TCN and chat with them. And then also, I just think this is wonderful. It's kind of impossible for botanists to go anywhere without trying to look at all the plants. We had about a 25-30 minute walk from our hotel to the conference center. So every day we mostly took the same path, but sometimes we went different ways, and we had a lot of fun doing some sidewalk botany and trying to ID some of the plants along our way. And for Peter, it helped him actually figure out how to get to the conference center by remembering which plants we passed along our route. And just for fun, I actually looked at iNaturalist between the dates of the conference and then the very next week. And you can see that there were over 350 observations by 43 observers during the conference week. And then the very next week in that same area, no observations. So we definitely made our mark iNatting throughout the conference as well, which was just kind of funny to see that. So that was a little bit about our participation and what we did. But now that y'all know how many symposia and talks there were, I'm personally just going to highlight some of the cool stuff of the talks I went to. But I'll encourage Tiana to pop in and share anything else as well. Because it definitely was hard to go to every single talk. I think I did the math that of just the 5 staff members who went, if we each went to every single symposia, one talk in each, um, for the whole week, including all the other lectures before and after these symposia, I think we would have gotten collectively went to over 240 talks, which is kind of crazy. So, and that's even, just a small portion of the total talks that there were available. So it was pretty obvious no matter what talk, whether it was specifically about herbaria or not, so many people are using herbaria for their research. And so I hope it was definitely validating for us to know that the work we do and the digitization that we're striving for is actually helping researchers from around the world. So just that in general was really awesome to see over and over again at either posters or talks. Um, I learned a new word that I hadn't learned before or even heard of before, herbariomics. And really, it's not a new concept, I guess, relatively recently, maybe, that genomic sampling of herbarium specimens is basically herbariomics. So getting DNA, sequencing that DNA from herbarium specimens. Um, and I put this paper in here because this graphic has been used, I think even by us before, but it was in a few presentations as well, just showing you at least here where herbarium specimens are held, and then accessibility of those specimens over time and how they're being used. Um, so this is still just a continuing trend that we're seeing. Of course, a lot of it is for taxonomic reasons and species distributions, but definitely this Congress, uh, we saw a lot of, uses of herbaria that I was familiar with, but also some novel stuff that I hadn't even considered yet. Um, so this was one that was really interesting. I think Tiana, you were in here with me for this one, looking at chemistry of plants using herbarium specimens. So Luis Saldana, he's not just has a background in botany, but he also has a background in chemistry. And so he was using herbarium specimens to analyze the chemical compounds of these plants. And I didn't realize that such a few number of species of threatened endangered species have reports of their chemistry. So a lot of this is really unknown. And y'all know, through understanding plants and learning their compounds, those could eventually help us for medicines and so many other things. So this was just really new to me, but I thought it was super interesting. Um, Also related to genomics, this talk, Frozen in Time, Changing with Climate, Alpine Endemics Speak Through Herbarium Genomics. She was investigating how alpine plant species, so species that are growing really up high elevations, how they're responding, how their genetics are responding to environmental changes over time, which was a really cool study that she was doing with herbarium specimens. And then also Pam Soltis gave a great plenary lecture, her title's right there, The Changing Face of Herbarium Collections. So just sharing the importance of herbaria. But I thought these 2 examples were really cool. So assessing herbivory from specimens using AI. So you can kind of see munches out of leaves in the specimen image or in the left image. So they're able to look at a specimen image and using AI, able to know, depending on the patterns of what has been eating the leaf, what insect was potentially eating that species. And then also reflectance from herbarium specimens. So looking at UV and wavelength from herbarium specimens was also very different. Um, so also, something that we've maybe like kind of touched on, but there was a whole symposia toward 2 sessions actually called Toward a More Ethical Science, Decolonizing Botanical Research. And these were really great talks. And I think that the work that our botanists do in other countries, I think we've done a great job at collaborating with local people and bringing them into this research and sharing knowledge with them. So this was just a great symposia to see different examples and how that can be done. So apologies for all my low quality images of all these slides, but here's from Ina's talk just about prioritizing fairness, inclusivity, and justice. So strengthening, inclusive community and allyship, changing academic language, decolonizing research agendas, um, all the things, especially focusing on uh, giving credit to communities where research is being done and also sharing the knowledge back to them and making sure that they have equal access and opportunities to research that's being done around them. So here's another way of decolonizing, at least ethnobiology was this portion of the talk, but just through scholarship and scholars projects and at the institution level, how we can decolonize, not just botanical research, but even collections as well. There were 2 sessions. They were named a little bit differently, but kind of talking about the same thing. So plant awareness disparity research and challenges in school education. And then another section called Beyond Plant Blindness, bringing plants into the foreground. And there was even a specific talk about, you know, the use of the word plant blindness versus plant awareness, and which is better to use, what kind, even kind of deciding what language is best to use to talk about the same thing. Maybe using plant blindness might be not the best way to look at it. I kind of like plant awareness disparity a little bit more than plant blindness, but it's still an ongoing, because I think I'm trying to remember when the term plant blindness was coined, and I know I went to her talk, so I should remember, but there's a lot of them. But it was great to see folks doing research in these areas and talking to especially, young children and, what do they notice about plants? What do they know just based on local knowledge? And do they even care about plants? So I don't know if y'all have heard about either of these 2 terms before, but it was really interesting, and they had some good ideas on, you know, things I think we could probably adopt to bring this to light. And that's kind of the goal of our institution. We want people to be more aware of plants around them. This might have been Tiana and I's favorite talk. Well, maybe I'm just guessing, but this was just such a cool talk. Erin Bentley, University of Wyoming, she's studying botany, but also was getting a degree in printmaking. So at their university, they have a printmaking studio, and she wanted a way to combine the two. So what's the quote on here? I don't think that they're exclusive. Science and art are just lenses through which we view the world. So through these workshops, they would select one herbarium specimen and split up a group that came for that day. And each person or a few people would do a little bit of research into the culture of the plant, history, art, and through each of, the collective, everyone separately coming back together with what they had learned and sharing with each other all the aspects of just this one species. And it was a great way for people to get a better view of, just a single specimen. And it just made really cool art. So this is somebody that, you know, you can see on the right image, they will travel for outreach. So it would be cool if we could maybe collaborate with this program. And I think, yeah, I'm gonna share their website here. There might be a gallery just to look at some of the images. They're really beautiful. Hey, this one was awesome too. So this was in a separate symposia called Let People Come to Botany, New Methods to Engage People with Plant Diversity. There were several talks, but this one, Glaucia Silva, she got a standing ovation at the end of this presentation because it was just so unique. She was teaching botany to students when COVID hit in March 2020. And so she wanted a way to still engage students virtually and still get them to learn botany. And at that moment, Taylor Swift's recent album and music videos had just come out. So she found a way to teach botany by each week giving her students one music video to look at. They would, you know, come up with their own assumptions or talk about the plants that they see. They would come together in class and kind of learn more about it. So basically, at the end of the course, there was a better appreciation for plants overall. And it was just super cool. I've never come across anything like this, and it was amazing. So you can see her email and her Instagrams right there. She researches Passiflora. Um, so Another great few symposia really touched on importance of libraries and archives. So this specific talk was about this Mike Trinza was working with herbarium specimens and came across a specimen collected by Very Vox Walcott and also had seen her illustrations on the Biodiversity Heritage Library website. And he was wondering, you know, are they related? And he found using AI and a lot of detective work, he was able to match herbarium specimens with her watercolor paintings, which was phenomenal and beautiful. And also, again, through libraries and archives, Madeline White was who she had no previous training in botany. I'm forgetting what her background was, but she is looking at, you know, all sorts of historical um, archives, illustrations, botanical books to kind of trace where some of these specimens in her specific herbarium came from. So sounded really interesting. And you can see maybe just how terrible some of this handwriting is on these old specimens, because, you know, 1700s, 1600s. Um, so lots of detective work, but had a lot of help through digitized historical archives. And this was great because it really reminded me that we're kind of doing something similar here. And I hope that the BRIT Library and the Herbarium can continue to collaborate on projects like this. So I'm putting a little plug, a little shout out to what our library is currently working on right now. And if you frequently come to our forums, you may remember this presentation that Krishna and Sam gave earlier this year, but the link to that, or the QR code is here to find that recording to learn a little bit more about this collection that they have a National Science Foundation grant for. But to give you a synopsis, our library has Dr. Sherwin Carlquist's slides and field notebooks, and then a herbarium in California has all of his herbarium specimens. So both institutions right now are working on imaging and transcribing and putting all of that data online and connecting it. So if you are interested in working on this kind of project, because I know a few of y'all have worked in herbarium, on some of our herbarium projects, this is a little bit similar, just different materials. So the BRIT Library is recruiting volunteers specifically for this project. If it sounds interesting to you, and you can reach out to our librarian, Ana Nino, at that email address. And then there's a QR code that'll take you to see some of those records that are already on the portal to Texas history. And that's everything, which I didn't know if I was going to be able to get through all of it. And I definitely didn't include everything that I wanted to. When I got back, a few of my friends wanted me to send pictures of my trip to Spain, and I told them it's mostly posters and pictures of slides. I don't have too much else. We did get a few hours of free time on 2 of the days. Tiana and I found a gem of a park that was wonderful, and we also got the opportunity to go to downtown Madrid and go to we went to the Prado Museum. So it wasn't all conference. We did get a little bit of free time to kind of explore Spain, but all that to say is my camera roll is mostly conference photos and slides. But we're happy to take any questions from the chat that y'all may have. Nice to go to the Prado. Yes, it was phenomenal. They have a free admission during the week from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we lined up at maybe 5:45 and the line was all the way down the street. The Prado is huge. All of us split up, Tiana and I, one of the students, Lucy and Peter. We all went in different directions and none of us were able to cover, all the ground. So that was kind of amazing. I'll stop sharing my screen.
But hopefully that gave you all an idea. I think Ashley and I both have attended other conferences relative to our profession, which the Botanical Society of America meetings are perhaps even more aptly the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections. So this was and because this conference happens so infrequently every 6 years and it was postponed due to COVID, this is huge to have over 3,000 botanists in one place. Gives you all the other opportunities aside from just attending the talks, just for networking and meeting people that you have only exchanged emails with. It was pretty spectacular. And I hope, just to reiterate what Ashley said earlier, that to be able to see our institution credited in other people's presentations, either explicitly or not, because they're using data dumps from GBIF and we're credited when you go to the links for their data, was really huge. And that isn't possible without what y'all are helping us to do. This is huge. So what you're doing does matter. It may be that, it's just hard to trace back exactly how and which one you get credited for, but it really does make a difference. So both iNatting and working with our specimens are pretty huge. Those are two resources for data, digitized data, images and specimen data that are used everywhere. So yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think the conference was about 500 euros, which is about the same as US dollars. So aside from that, it's the cost of lodging. And, if you were on the ball, you were able to get an Airbnb early enough, and you could do that. I will say that I think that the per diem for Madrid is something like 150 US dollars, something like that. I might be wrong, but I mean, we were well under that, like easily less than a third of that. So we were pretty careful in how we did that. But yeah, so we didn't claim that per diem. So, but just to let you know that it can be super expensive depending on how you eat. And I think one thing Ashley and I both had to adjust to was the eating time schedules and the fact that dinner happened really late.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Everyone eats so late in Madrid, and my tummy couldn't handle it. I was a hungry girl a lot during the week, but we made it. But yeah, just to add that it was really cool to meet people that, like you said, that maybe we've only emailed before. And yeah, meeting people that we've collaborated with all over the world. We had one big dinner with all of our BRIT staff and then students and other friends, and it was just a huge table, all different languages being spoken. So it was kind of it was a cool experience. No breakfast buffet. There was, well, I guess we did have a buffet at for our hotel, which was nice. But yes, I did enjoy walking from breakfast to the conference center and doing our sidewalk botany along the way.
And I will say, aside from, this is obviously you're hearing about some of the highlights of what we saw, but the things that we don't really talk about that we take back to what we're doing are future collaborations with people, or seeing how other people have presented similar projects that we've done in a way that we like, examples of publications, or even, because you were asking, I think it was you, Denise, that asked about whether these were published presentations. And I mentioned that sometimes it's people in the process, preliminary results, or it is a publication that they're just verbally expressing. But often it's the case that, Ashley and I are in a session and they're presenting on something and we're like, oh, you know what? We have a ton of passiflora from Brazil, but it's not digitized yet. Let me go ahead and digitize that and grab that author's email address and let them know when they're available. So that's the other kind of way that we can contribute. And for us to know, especially for us as collections management professionals, to understand how people are using herbarium specimens informs us how we can better prepare them from the point of, collecting, actually, because we both do that,
Mhm.
but from the point of mounting it on a specimen, perhaps, or where we put labels and how we put them on there, what kinds of data we include on labels. So this will, this is part of our professional development that will improve how we do things here, and how we start projects and what kind of projects we work on.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a good question, Denise. I think we're on the same wavelength. Change anything major? Ashley, I don't know if you want to address that question. Would we change anything major in how we're doing things currently?
I think there were, one topic I didn't mention was citizen science. There were two symposia about citizen science. And so maybe this isn't major, but definitely, and especially, those two symposia on plant blindness, plant awareness, more not major changes right away, but kind of bringing those ideas back here. I'm hoping that we can be better stewards and at least make our specimens more available in a way that reaches the public in a better way. And also having the public participate with us. And also, I mean, botanical art, knowing the importance of botanical art in both education and research. I hope that it would be great for our institution to make that a priority again. So I think those would be kind of not major changes, but probably bigger ideas that I'd like to implement here.
So Beth asked another question. Were there any particularly interesting connections we made with people using BRIT data and collections that was a surprise? Oh, I remember a lot of, it's funny. I was telling somebody the other day that, Ashley told you how many presentations we could have theoretically gone to. How many how many was that per person, Ashley? Because I would find that I would go to these presentations. I would do what Ashley did, take pictures of screens, take notes on my phone to attach to those images. And I would tell Ashley afterwards when we sat down for lunch, I'd be like, Ashley, I found this talk. And I would find that I could explain the A and the Z, but I couldn't tell her how they got there sometimes. So there were like big frag. I
Yes.
feel like I needed to defrag my brain. So
Yeah.
I have all those notes to go um, back to as well.
It was
Uh,
information overload in the best way. Um, but I think Beth probably, I mean, do I know specifically if people are using BRIT data? I'm not sure for like some of these interesting talks, like the chemistry one, or even using detecting wavelength reflection off these leaves. Those were two that I had, maybe the herbivory I've a little bit seen, but chemistry and stuff like that. I mean, those are new ways to use herbarium specimens to me. So whether I know if they've used BRIT data or not, I'm not sure. Because like Tiana said, sometimes in some presentations, I mean, some people would specifically put the herbarium acronym of, from the data that they used for whatever their research was, and then sometimes they didn't say. But yeah, it like I said before, I mean, everyone is using herbarium data in whatever way they can for their research.
Yeah.
And always there's more new novel ways to use them. And I think we'll still find that going forward.
Yeah, and I will say that as far as like digitized data, people were using completely digitized records that had coordinates on them already. So in terms of the value of georeference specimen, that was
Hmm.
pretty huge. There's a lot of these presentations where people are doing the work with an organismal, group of plants, and they're going to want to map it. So they're going to go to the trouble of georeferencing things. So having a fully digitized record was huge. And I will say that it was really interesting because, the term digitization is very general in many ways, and people mean different things when they say it. So it was really kind of great to hear the different presentations. And, there was a lot of questions, and there's not very much time for questions. There's a bit, but you were able to like pinpoint an author and potentially go talk to them afterwards. Um, Denise asked a question about Europeans using INAT. If you're referring to Ashley's comment as well, the area in which we were was a convention center, like a huge convention center. Imagine tons of concrete.
Yeah. But in general, Europeans are using iNaturalist. I think it even is called something else. Do you remember, Tiana?
No, but there are other systems that we heard presentations about, including I think in Brazil as well. They're not INAT, but
Yes, it's INAT based, but they might have a different name. But yes, they are using it. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't highlight some of the citizen scientists symposia, but there were many presentations on INAT blitzes and using that to teach students or get the community involved. And they were from all over the world. So that's really it was cool to see just how INAT has just grown so much and is reaching other people.
yeah, I think, and also, was it PlantNet? I can't remember, but there's the cool thing about INAT, and even if there are other systems, I mean, there's such a great user base for INAT internationally, but they are all, or many of these can be aggregated at the global level through the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is GBIF, and they are. I don't know. Well, I can pull up it's just gbif.org, I think. But I'm going to share a link with you. And this is a page that, oh, sorry. Oh, goodness. This is a page that um, aggregates a lot of those data so you can download them and see them in one place. So it's pretty useful. So even if people are using different systems, they can be looked at one place at this
Mhm.
level.
I appreciate y'all's questions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was exciting to share, and this was a quick turnaround-ish for us. But of course, if y'all are interested in anything else or have any other questions for us, please email us. Um, yeah.
Are there just thinking about, are there other questions y'all have unrelated to this presentation, or suggestions you have for future armchair botany sessions? I know Ashley frequently asks, or, periodically asks y'all.
Yeah. Um, the garden, we just had a meeting about kind of our upcoming events here. For those of you who are local, we're kicking off Celebramos at the beginning of September, um, celebration of Latin America. And we think that we will try next month for the September AB. We may give a presentation focused on that in Latin Conservation Week as well. So look forward to September's AB. And of course, if you're interested, again, let me put Anna's email in here. for anyone, or if you know anyone that may be interested in the project with our library, definitely reach out to Anna. And thank you guys for your just continued support. We appreciate y'all and love having you with us every month and in between too.